Hey everybody, my name is Laura and welcome to my very first YouTube video. I have been wanting to do this for literally years and I have finally decided to just go for it and film something, however imperfect it might be. Why, you might think, start when, for example, I have a breakout? That's a great question. The answer is September is almost over. And I decided September was the perfect opportunity to come in and speak about something that I feel really passionately about. And that is any international student who is going to school in the UK is probably doing that right now. And that is what I did. In 2009, I went from St. Louis to Liverpool for school. I would end up living there for the next 10 years and do 3 degrees in history there. And these are things that maybe I knew some of them going in, and I'm sure you do as well. So some of them won't be new information, but others are very much lessons learned, often the hard way, and things that I would have liked to know before I went off halfway across the world by myself when I was a teenager. So that's something that I'd really like to share with you, just in hopes that maybe it can even find one person and be useful information and make your journey and your transition just a little bit smoother. So with that, I have my Liverpool mug, I have my blanket, so let's get cozy and dive into it. So first, just a little bit about me, and I will go into this more in future videos because I kind of want to keep the focus on starting school in a British university for this video. But broad background, I am originally from St. Louis, Missouri in the US. Like I said, in 2009, I moved over to Liverpool, not knowing anybody and kind of just going over by myself and very fresh to the situation, and studied history then for the next 10 years. I did my bachelor's, my master's, and my PhD as a full international student on student loans that I'll probably be paying the rest of my life, but we don't have to think about that today. And it was just such a fantastic time, because when you have that opportunity to study internationally and see things through those external eyes, they just kind of permanently shape the way that you see your life and the world around you. So fast forward to about 5 or 6 years ago, I finished my PhD and moved back to St. Louis. At that point, I knew that I wanted to kind of shift from my original idea, which was that I thought I wanted to be a history professor. And then during my PhD, 2015, 2016, things get a little politically rocky, and I decide that actually I would like to go pursue a career in government and politics and policy after I'm done with my PhD. So when I moved back, I jumped on a couple of political campaigns and did that for a couple of years before ultimately moving to DC to work in the international relations policy community. And I am now just outside of DC in Maryland, still working in policy, but currently outside in the Baltimore area. So, so essentially all that to say, I love talking about international study. I encourage people to do it if they can, wherever I have the opportunity to provide that encouragement, because it has shaped my life in such a big way, and continues to impact the way that I see the world. So even though I am now pursuing a career in policy, and I didn't stick to academia, I still value my time in Liverpool and think about it very fondly. So every September that I'm thinking about the new generation of international travelers and international students, and there's just so much that if I could go back in time that I wish that I knew at that point. And some of them, like I said, I knew, but others I had no idea what I was walking into. So I just wanted to get into a few of those key things that you want to make sure that you kind of go in eyes wide open and that you understand these points before starting your new international student journey. So the first thing, and I'm sure that this goes without saying, but like I said, I've gone to many years since I've actually gone back to school in September. And so I'm sure that some of these might have kind of evolved and changed. So please comment below and tell me what has changed from my experience several years ago. Also, this is going to be very unique to a history and humanities student experience, and also probably very unique to the US experience of moving to the UK to go to school. And I'm sure there are a lot of other really great tips for other cultures going to the UK for school. And if so, please comment and share those down below because I would love to learn more about them. With all those disclaimers and the context in mind, am ready to dive in. So the first thing that I think you probably already know about, but it is the degree structure. And it's just worth a quick note at the top. So as I'm sure you already know, a British bachelor's degree takes 3 years instead of 4. And that is because you're not gonna have any general education, and unless it is relevant to your major, your discipline, you're probably not gonna do a language either. So if you are somebody who wants the general education because you want a more well-rounded education, you wanted to learn the language, you maybe needed to take some time during those first 2 years to figure out what you actually want to do for your major, then this probably isn't the structure that is going to work best for you. However, if you know what you want to do and you don't really care about doing the language on the side and you just want to dive in and focus, then this is going to be an amazing structure for you because you just get to get in. I was a historian in the making. I didn't want to take like science and math, and I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what I loved. I knew what I wasn't good at. And maybe that is an attitude I'm sure that can be criticized. But if you are like me and you just want to do 3 intensive focused years on your area of study, this is going to be fantastic for you. So bachelor's is going to be 3 years. Similarly, master's is probably going to take you a year, but it is going to be a different level of focus and intensity than something you would get in a US school. The next thing to note is the timetable structure. Your timetable is going to be made up of lectures and seminars. To be honest, like I've never actually been to a US university outside of a community college, so maybe that's very typical and this sounds really obvious, but it's all going to be lectures and seminars, and it's really going to be a lot of self-guided reading. Something that surprised me was how much independent study time there was versus being with a professor or a tutor or other students. And the reason that you have that time is because you will probably have a lot of reading and preparation that you need to do for each of those seminars. And the seminars are really, they will give you what you put into it. So if you show up and haven't done the assigned reading and you don't participate, then you're probably not going to get a lot out of them. But if you show up and you've done the reading and you're chiming into the discussion and you are kind of there to add in, you are going to get a lot from these seminars. So really something to consider. And one other thing that I want to note on this is the grading system. And that's a pretty giant caveat because essentially you need to go in with no US misconceptions about the UK grading system, or it will break you spiritually and emotionally. So essentially, throw out everything that you know about the grading system, because what you're working with now is a 70% and above is a first. Something in the 60s is a 2-1 or an upper class degree. It's something in the 50s is a 2-2. Something in the 40s is a third, and anything below 40 is failing. So what this means in practical purposes is you might submit your first essay and think you did a great job, and you probably did do a great job, and you get back a 58 or maybe a 63. And from an American standpoint, those sound like really, really bad, terrible numbers. Those are not numbers that we would associate with doing a good job or kind of getting high marks. But in the UK system, especially in the first year when you're still feeling out the way that you need to write and structure these, etc., those are actually really great grades. And it's gonna be kind of hard to get into that mentality because you know, it's tough as an American to go in and get something in the low 60s and then be told that that is a very good job. Equally, even if you get a 71 or a 72, which is incredible, you're gonna feel like it's gonna be hard to not feel like you just got a C, for example. So that is just something worth kind of giving a little bit of extra thought and preparation, maybe having a couple of conversations, and it might even still feel like a little bit of a gut punch when you get some of your first assignments back and get what is actually a good mark, but feel that you have not done a very good job at all. So just something to put on your radar and something to kind of think about. I promise you are probably going to do a fantastic job with it, and it is very much a mindset and mentality thing. So just something to note, but definitely something that I promise you will acclimate to, and it will seem normal after a while. So now that we've kind of thought about the grading system, I wanted to talk for a minute about assignments. So this is particularly from a history and probably humanities perspective. I'm sure it's very different in the sciences, in math, etc. But for me, the only two things that I had throughout each course that contributed to my overall grades were essays throughout the semester, and then a final exam, which was more of the essay content. So essays are pretty self-explanatory, but I didn't have little like quizzes or true or false or multiple choice exams or anything like that ever. It was always just the essays throughout the semester. And that's the same at the end of the semester when it's time to take your final exams. And I think I expected a little bit more like a US system with multiple choice, etc. And that doesn't show up. It was essentially a random, like you know during your revision timetable that you need to essentially cover everything that you have learned that semester in that course. And for a historian in training, that's usually, I mean, that could be centuries. And you don't know what's gonna be asked on exam day. So essentially you pick a few topics and you revise those topics and try to learn enough that you can then sit down on the spot and write an essay. And even if you've studied the topic, it might be the way that they frame the question that you haven't quite prepared for, which has definitely happened to me before. And essentially you go in on exam day and you open the book and there will be a list of essay questions, and it'll say, for example, pick 2 and write essays, and then you sit down on the spot and you write these essays and then you leave. And so it, for me, was a very different system, and maybe some of you will come in and your education to date has included a lot more of that, but for me, that really took some getting used to and was pretty challenging, which is why you'll hear a lot of discourse about the revision period for final exams. Often you'll even get some time off of classes. People take it really seriously because it is a lot more intense than at least what I was expecting and what I was used to. So now we've covered degrees and timetables and assignments and grading, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about the kind of life side of it all. So first I wanted to talk about housing and dorms. So you will very likely, in your first year, everybody will live in halls of residence. And this is essentially dorms, but amazing news for all introverts, you will have your own bedroom. There is none of this dorm sharing roommate nonsense, I'm speaking as an introvert, that you would have in the US system, which is amazing. I mean, I guess if you are a person who is looking forward to having a roommate for some reason, then this is not the system for you. But if you were looking forward to having a little bit of your own privacy and space, this is going to be great for you, because you will have the people in your dorm building who you'll see sometimes, and then you will see a lot of the people if you maybe have a hallway with 10 rooms, and those will probably be some of the people you'll get closest to or at least see the most. But then you have your own oasis, and you can just shut the door and you can just be alone, and it's wonderful. So for me, and for any introverts going into this system, you'll be really pleased with that difference between the UK and the US dorming structure. Very typically, students will only stay in halls for their first year in the UK. And then I would say the most common route is to move into a house with a bunch of friends. And this can be like 7 or 8 bedroom house. And I think I actually didn't do it because I went a different route, but very common. I'm sure a lot of fun to be had. I'm sure definitely downsides. But just the one flag that I wanted to include here is, again, and I'm talking to introverts because I don't feel like the world is built for us sometimes. So I just feel like it's worth sometimes the extra note, but you don't have to do this. It's gonna feel like everybody else is doing it and everybody will talk and you might get asked to move into a house, but if you would rather just move into a studio or a 1-bedroom and just live by yourself, you should absolutely just go for it. Do whatever is gonna make you comfortable and whatever is gonna kind of protect your peace, and you can always go see your friends and go do all your stuff, but then just have your own place to go back to. So just kind of one thing to note there. The next thing that I wanted to talk about is cultural differences, and I mean this in a few different senses of the term. So the first one is there are definitely going to be moments where the linguistic and cultural differences can cause some tension, or maybe some awkward moments. So it might be that you've used the wrong word for something, which has definitely happened for me, but it actually created a little bit of a social mess because of the word that you chose, which you thought was fine, and actually it means something else. So there's definitely some of those moments. But another big thing is, I mean, you really are stepping outside of your own country and exposing yourself to the pretty unfiltered views of people from everywhere else in the world who are now speaking about your country and your culture, and in your mind, like your family and your friends, in a pretty harsh way that maybe you haven't heard before. And of course we hear of Americans who are critiquing the system or who are protesting, etc. But I think it feels and it hits a little bit differently when it's coming from somebody outside of the culture, because sometimes it's really like they are not concerned with being respectful. They have no reason to kind of like protect your feelings with the language that they're going to use. And so you are opening yourself up to actually quite a bit of criticism. And I was surprised at sometimes how personally I took that. I think some of that was also because this is in the beginning of my education. And so I was very young and definitely had a heck of a lot of maturing to do. These are things that if I heard them now, I wouldn't even think twice, or I would completely go about the conversation differently. But when you're, 19 and everything's a big deal and you think that everything is a personal attack. Some of these things can kind of be a bit of a gut punch. So just, I would say, take these conversations and the criticisms with a pinch of salt. Take them with grace, show humility, have an open heart and an open mind. It's not that serious. And know that I think in the grand scheme of things, it's really good for you to hear these views, because that, in addition to kind of the other ways that you are getting this bigger cultural experience, those are going to permanently shape your nuanced view of the world and will impact the way that you see everything, the way that your ability to talk about like what is great about your own country and what actually needs some work and where we could learn from other countries. It just broadens your mind in such a good way. So even though those things are hard to hear, and sometimes they might be completely inaccurate, or sometimes somebody might deliver them in a very undiplomatic way, the experiences are going to be good for you and will make your mind so much more open long-term into appreciating your country, but also being able to kind of take a little bit more of an objective view about what we can do better. And those are all really good things. The second type of cultural difference is the school spirit. So I say school spirit, I guess I mean lack of school spirit. I think when we think of American universities, we think about the big, everybody's going to the football game and everybody's decked out in school gear and there's a mascot running around, and it's just very like pep rally-esque. And this is not what is happening in UK universities. I mean, you can get a hoodie, they'll have school stores, and they do have clubs and sports teams and organizations, but you will not get that same level of enthusiasm, which I think is also emblematic of the US culture versus UK culture. Americans tend to be a lot more enthusiastic and Brits tend to be a lot more dry and even keeled. So don't go over and expect that rah, go school spirit that you would have in a US school, because you're not going to find it there. But you will definitely still be able to find ways to really maximize your experience. Join a lot of clubs, the very specialized organizations for anything that you either like or would want to explore, and get yourself a nice hoodie, but just don't expect the mascot to be running around campus all day long. The third piece of cultural advice I want to give to you is actually on drinking culture. British drinking culture is no joke. It is frequent, and they go hard and they do their pre-drinks and then they go out. The drinking age is 18, so that is gonna shape the culture around it. And that will be probably several nights a week. And so if you go in, I hadn't really drank much at all before I went in. I'm sure some of you will be going in kind of with a different background. So I think it was particularly shocking for me. But one of the difficulties I had with this is, especially when you're living in halls your first year, it really does feel like everybody's doing it. It might be everybody on your floor is going out, and so they're using the kitchen for pre-drinks and it's really loud, and then everybody goes out and they come back and it's really loud, and you do feel a pressure to kind of get involved and to go out and go clubbing and be in that environment. And I just think it again, kind of like the introverted thing, if you want to live on your own. If you're not a drinker and you don't want to do this, don't do it. It doesn't matter. Really not a big deal for you to just sit it out. Or if you want to go out and soak in the cultural experience and have fun with the group, but you just don't really want to drink, that's also okay. There's a lot of fancy dress parties way outside of just Halloween where they have a theme and everybody gets dressed up and goes out somewhere. So like, participate if that stuff sounds fun, but just don't feel like you have to do that same level of drinking, because it's totally okay to also have your boundaries with that. And like, I'm just not a big party person. I think I've been through a couple of phases where I definitely went out more, but generally that is not me. And I felt a little uncomfortable being on the more conservative side in that way, because it was not the norm and definitely would make me stand out, but I just didn't really enjoy it. So I think I went along with it more than I would have liked to, and that is why my advice to you is to feel very comfortable setting that boundary. So that's it for cultural side. The one last thing I wanted to note to anybody who is going to school abroad is to travel as much as you possibly can. There are loads of really cheap ways that you can travel on a shoestring budget. I understand this conversation has a lot of money undertones. Like I said, I have a student loan that I will be paying off for a very long time. I was not getting help from my family. They couldn't afford it. So I am not saying this as some rich kid that went over and was getting bankrolled. So something that I would do, I would try and kind of scrimp and save some of the living expenses that I was getting with my loan during some parts of the year, so that I could put together some really cheap weekend trips. Or on Easter break is a good opportunity, because you might find yourself with 2 or 3 weeks off at Easter break. And with flight, you can do a Ryanair, you can do an EasyJet. I don't know what the prices are right now, but I know that when I was over there, I could go to Europe on a flight for $30. Did it feel like the best quality flight? No. Did we often land an hour and a half away from the actual city that we were trying to go to? Absolutely. It's not the most convenient time, but those aren't the pieces of the memories that will stick with you the most. If you buy those cheap flights and you make the public transportation thing work, or do a lot of walking, and you find a safe and cheap hostel to stay at, and you try to kind of watch the food prices when you're there, you'd be surprised at how cheaply you can put time in Italy or Germany or France or Spain or whatever together for yourself. So just go for it as much as you possibly can. If you can get kind of a side gig to save up a little bit of travel money, then do it, because these are things that you're gonna remember forever. And I just still hold those memories so dear. Oh, and something else, I didn't even plan on saying this, but it's something that is so important. Go by yourself if you want to. There's so many good resources now for solo travel, and obviously all the caveats on be safe, be smart, really pay attention to that safety piece, especially as a woman traveling by yourself. But with all that kind of assumed, don't feel like you always have to do this with a group or even with a friend. Start to feel comfortable with saying, I'm gonna go to Paris for the weekend by myself. And the plus side is you get to do exactly what you want. You don't have to consult with anybody. If you feel like kind of going out and doing something, then you can do that. If you feel like, actually I'm exhausted and I want to stay here and take a nap, that's fine. Whatever you want to eat, whatever you want to do, it's your decision. So don't poo-poo solo travel. Because you might just kind of talk yourself out of traveling more broadly if every time you're insisting on waiting for somebody who can go with you and who wants to take that particular trip. So just go for it and enjoy it, because those are the things that you're gonna look back when you're an old fart like me and you're 35. That is what you're gonna really cherish the most. Thank you guys so much for joining my first video. This was really great to be able to kind of relive these memories and think about the things that I learned and what I wish I would have known going into it, what I wish I could have kind of talked to somebody about before or during my time there. Most importantly, just be safe and have the best time ever, because this is gonna change your life forever. And I'm very excited and hope that you share your experiences in the comment section, because I want to live vicariously and continue to kind of pretend in my head like every September I'm going to be flying to Liverpool and going to my history classes. So have the best time and just enjoy yourself. And please, I know that this is super early days for my channel, but please subscribe, please comment and speak to me there so I can learn more about you. I look forward to making more content on international study, but also the things that I'm doing now. So life in DC and life in kind of government and policy and politics and general lessons learned by my mid-30s. And I really look forward to creating that content and sharing it with you guys. Thank you so much, and I will see you very soon.